Ableton tutorial. Lovely to have you here. Big shout out YouTube gang, big shout out Patreon gang. The support on Patreon really does mean a lot, so thank you to these awesome folks supporting over there. Patreon members will be able to download this entire set at the end of today, of course, as always. Right, what are we looking at today? Well, I wanted to look at making a step sequencer, and I wanted to make a step sequencer that we could map to sort of literally anything inside of Ableton. When we use sort of things like the SQ sequencer, super nice. I love this sequencer. I've done a bunch of videos using it, but we only have a certain number of things that we can actually sequence: pitch, octave, velocity, length, time shift, ratchet, and condition. And the other step sequencers are kind of the same. We're locked into what we can actually control. I wanted to make a step sequencer that could control literally anything inside of Ableton. So here I have actually got it controlling velocity, which is controlling this drum rack over here. Let me just show you what's happening over there. This is a drum rack that I made using multi-samples from sticking things in a piano. It's got a bunch of different sounds that all sound like this. Patreon members can also download this drum rack and all of the individual multi-samples now as well. Then I was just using a step sequencer to trigger the notes. And then using this step sequencer to sort of control the velocity. I made another example over here. Let's check it out. And here I'm using the step sequencer to control the wavetable position. So you can hear totally different results. And again, I can sort of slowly change these things, slowly change each individual step. At the start, I was doing that on the push. Here, I'm just doing it with the mouse. Let's go back to the other thing. It's just a bit easier to talk over the top of. I did have a comment asking if I could make my mouse movements more visible. Haven't quite figured out how to do that. I'm using QuickTime screen grab. If anybody knows how to do that, drop a comment below. But yeah, we're going to make this step sequencer. And it came about because I kind of wanted to create a way that I could slowly change values, interact with them, perform with them, and then have sort of these patterns that emerge as you slowly change one accent. If you've been watching this channel a bit recently, I'm really interested in these sort of patterns that repeat and iterate and slowly permutate and slowly change. So I wanted to create a kind of a step sequence where I could do that. But that I could connect that to literally anything inside of Ableton. I didn't yet try connecting it to the tempo. I'm a little bit scared about doing that, but let's get started. Let's get started. So we're going to build this with a wavetable. I'm going to drag a wavetable into a new channel. I'm going to double click and make a MIDI note. I'm just going to play C3. I'm going to make it go for the. Let's make it an F. Let's make it F2, and let's make that go for the whole bar. Hit legato there. In front of the wavetable here, I'm just going to bring in MIDI effect and arpeggiator, and that's just going to create a bunch of notes for us. As we'd expect, we can make those notes longer or shorter using the gate here. Let's just change the sound a tiny little bit. Let's just change this to, let's go with FM harmonics. And let's bring the decay down and bring the sustain all the way up. So yeah, something like that. That's going to help us really hear what's going on. Right, so how are we going to make a step sequencer? Well, we're going to create a series of chains that we're going to step through incrementally. We're going to use those chains to create a value. Doesn't really matter what we create that value with, but we're going to use velocity, but that's not so important. We're going to then join all those values together and look at how we can map that all around Ableton. So I'm going to start by bringing in a MIDI effects velocity, and it's actually going to be the velocity plugin that we're going to use to create these values, but it's not going to have to be velocity that it's always controlling. We're going to map it any way we like. So I'm going to change this to fixed. This means that the output of this velocity, the output low doesn't make a change. We just have a fixed value, so we can really dictate what the output of this is. And because it's a velocity plugin, it goes from 0 to 127. Nice. I'm now going to turn that into a group. I'm going to select it, press Command G. And I've turned that into a group, and I'm going to duplicate that. So I've got 8 of them. We're going to make an 8-step sequencer here. So Command D, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to rename these Step 1, Step 2, etc. I'll probably fast forward through this in the video, I think. Okay, I've got my 8 steps here. I'm going to open up the chain selector. I'm going to drag the bottom one across to number 7 because we have 8 steps and we begin on 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Select them all, right click, distribute ranges equally. So now I can use the chain selector to move through each of these steps. Now I'm going to come in here and on each of these, we can sort of hide. I don't know. I'm going to right click and I'm going to map that to macro 9 because I'm going to use the first 8 to be the values of our 8 steps in the 8-step sequence. So I'm going to map that to macro 9. I'm already going to come in here and change the range to go from 0 to 7. I don't want it to go all the way up. Right, we can now hide that. So I'm now going to come into step 1. I'm going to right click on output high and I'm going to map that to macro 1. I'm going to do the same thing for all of these. Step 2, map to macro 2. Step 3, map to macro 3. Step 4, map to macro 4. Probably fast forward through this. And I'm now going to rename all of these as well. Probably fast forward through this too. Okay, so I've now got my 8 steps. I'm just going to open up this and I've got my chain selector that's going to allow me to step through the different values. So if I now randomize this, yeah, we can hear the different values corresponding to each of those steps. Super nice. How are we going to step through it? Well, we're going to use an expression control to do that. So I'm going to bring in an expression control in front. And we're going to use incremental. So we're going to come in here and change this to incremental. Yeah, we want to leave it on 8 steps. We want a linear scale. We want this to go 100%. I'm going to move the chain selector all the way down to 0 before I map it. And now I'm going to map that to here. So now we can see it on the MIDI thing here. If we open up the chain, we can see it stepping through those steps each time it receives a new MIDI note. Super nice. Now, side note, if you want to make this 7 steps or 3 steps or however many more steps, you need to change 2 things. You need to change the steps here and you need to come in here into the mapping and adjust this value so that this is only giving you 8 discrete values as well. Otherwise, this incremental is always going to go from 0 to full on the chain selector and it's going to divide it into an even number of steps. So if we change this to 3 steps, for instance, you can see the outputs here. We're getting output on step 1 and then output on step 4 and output on step 8. And that can just be really annoying when you're actually trying to change the values. So if you do want to change the number of steps, you have to change it in both places. I haven't figured out a nice smooth way to put all of that on a macro yet. If you can think of a way to do that, please drop a comment below because that would be super helpful. Right. Okay, so now we have our steps. They're stepping through. We're generating different values for each of those steps. Super nice. We can hide this. But we don't want this velocity information to be getting to the synthesizer. We just want this velocity information to be able to use these 8 individual values between 0 and 127 to be able to map to anything. I'm just going to close this so we can only see the steps now. That's all we need to see. So I'm going to bring in another expression control in here. So the expression control works every time it receives a MIDI note. It analyzes the velocity of that MIDI note. It analyzes the pressure of that MIDI note and it analyzes the slide value of that MIDI note. These are MPE controls. And then we can also just generate random values and incremental values. So here we're generating 8 different velocity values. So this we can use to map to anywhere because the expression control is going to output something based on those velocity values. But this is still not going to the synthesizer. So let's make a situation where it doesn't do that. I'm going to select the expression control. I'm going to select the MIDI effect rack and I'm going to select the other expression control and I'm going to turn those into a group, Command G. I'm actually going to rename this second expression control output, step output. Let's name it step output. Right. Now we have all of this inside of one big group. We're going to open up the chains here and I'm actually just going to turn this off. So it's still receiving MIDI notes. It's still generating new values. We can see it generating new values here on the step output device, but it's not actually sending anything through. So I can now right click and create a chain and this is going to be our through chain. Lovely. Now I'm going to minimize this and I'm going to right click and map all of these macros to the macros out in the big rack there. Map to macro 2, map to macro 3, map to macro 4, map to macro 5, map to macro 6, map to macro 7, map to macro 8. Okay, so now I can even hide this. I can close all of this stuff. And here's is my step sequencer. But how do we map that anywhere? Well, we open it back up again, and on our step sequencer here, it's this step output. So we can connect this output to anything now. It doesn't have to be pitch related or velocity related. So for instance, we could map this to the wavetable position here. And we can see and hear that changing as we change these step values here. Super nice. Let's put this down an octave. Is that a sub? Lovely. Let's also connect this with something else. Let's turn the warp up a little bit. And now let's connect this with the fold here. Super nice, but let's create a bit of a ramp when it falls down. There we go. Oh. Super nice. So we can get like this kind of glissando effect happening, but it's happening on the fold, and it's only happening when it goes down. And we could of course make it go both ways as well, but I think it's nice when it's only going down. Let's do the same thing with this, but let's do it in the opposite direction. Super nice. So we now have a step sequencer that we can map anywhere inside the project, and we can sort of slowly perform with these individual values. I'm now using my push. I don't have the camera connected, I'm sorry, but you can see the values sort of slowly changing, and you can hear the sequence permutating and changing as a result. This is super nice. Yeah. Super nice. So let's take a quick look at how I did that over here on this sort of Piano Gong gamelan-y sounding thing. So here I have a step sequencer. So the step sequencer is generating the notes, and the notes are corresponding to the specific samples that are getting played on the drum rack over there. So if I randomize these notes, we get different samples being played. And here I do have these steps just controlling a velocity. And this is how I was able to sort of have different accents sort of fade in. So we can fade in step number 4 and fade out step number 3. Let's fade in step number 6. So it's super fun to play with. I think this is a super versatile little rack that you can use kind of in a lot of different projects. It's really fun to perform with. That's it for today. Patreon members can download this entire set. Patreon members can also download this instrument that I've made. I'll fix it up and put some colors in it and put something on Macro 1 and stuff like that as well. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time.